All right, well, it's 4:04 on November 21st, 2024. Our chair nor vice chair appear to be here. So with that, we can wait just a couple more minutes if we'd like. Tonight, we have no action items are on the, or nothing we're going to make a recommendation on. Everything tonight is a recommendation or a report. So with that, I'll turn that over to our chair who just sat down in her chair.
It's just the view sticker on it. What have you got, changed?
Hold on, Amy's on.
Not exactly sure. Is she able to try to log in?
That's a good one.
She clicked on the site, that's just touching on the live via YouTube. Oh, that won't be into the Zoom. Please not do this.
No, she, yeah, she is. So if you guys don't mind, while we have a few moments while Patty's logging on, we had a citizen drop off a book of articles from 1944 and 1945 of news articles regarding Mingus Park. And it's the only copy we have. But you can take a look at it. No, we just got this, I think it was Monday of this week, or maybe Thursday or Friday of last week, I can't remember. But it's pretty interesting. The archery in the park was a big deal back in the day. Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it was one of the things that I'm finishing up and should be ready to transmit Monday after the proofreading is the State Historic Preservation wanted a sampling of everything that was done at that cabin for the last 84 years. So I went back and made a notebook with specifics and a sampling of all the organizations and activities that have been held there. And it's pretty interesting because it mirrors kind of the falling off of what newspapers were reporting in the past. And it's really interesting. The original scout cabin that was out at Coos Head is the location where Bassador's Davies is. It was logged, it wasn't the same kind of log, and the fireplace was enough to hold a 6-foot log. It cost $4,000 in 1922-23 building, and the Lions Club International, Coos Bay, Marshfield, did the funding. And it immediately started having people messing with it, vandalizing it. In 1935, they were rebuilding it, and in 1945, it burned down. So I don't know what happened to that fireplace. It had to be a big fireplace. The bluff overlooking Coos Head. So the bluff overlooking the jetty is either that small space where the Coast Guard deck is, but it's a 40-foot by whatever dimension, and so it had to be where that park is now on that bluff.
Which makes sense, because that's where the lines will be.
Yep, and so anyway, and then where they used to go out, and who was involved, people with last names like Kaiser, 1912 on, 1925, could be a bunch of young men from Coos, Marshfield, and surrounding areas to Yellowstone Park for 32 days doing gypsy camping from Coos Bay. Remember, bridges, all that stuff aren't there. And they're driving up to Portland, Seattle, over to Yellowstone, taking them out to see smelters and mining operations. Anyway, and then having to cancel one of their first camp out summers in 1912 because of a typhoid outbreak on the Coquille River. So they had to go up to Cherry Creek where Ham Law and Boat Ramp is now. So when the question is put to us from SHPO, why was that building in Mingus Park important for youth activities? That's where they were having to go to do those experiences, and there's no bridges.
Yeah.
Patty says that now it's just kicked her out completely, so she will join us next time. So we're just gonna go ahead. She doesn't want to hold us up anymore.
Okay,
So. Okay, so we are back in order, or unordered. We're ordered of unordered.
sounds great.
So we'll start out with roll call, and we'll start out at the end with Bill.
Bill Davis.
Coco Sutton.
Ariane Lyons.
Jamie Faraday.
Kirk Benward.
Greg Hamblett, City of Coos Bay.
Christina Texera, City of Coos Bay.
And Amy Edmonds, City of Coos Bay.
Thank you so much. We will start out with the first action item, the Marshfield Cemetery update.
It was different. So, Cricket Souls, and I live just outside of the city limits of Coos Bay. And this is sort of an update. We've heard a lot of the things, but it's going forward as much as an update. So we call it Partners to Preserve the Cemetery for a reason. That seems to be our strong suit. We've partnered with Marshfield. The OBAB is a great partner for the beautification, although next year they may only come for May, and we'll see how that works. And then the American Legion helped us with the things that we did for dedicating the 3 headstones that were installed this year. And we're about halfway through the project to restore all the absolutely have to be restored cemetery monuments. There'll always be some that we could probably do, following the national park standards, that we could probably do on our own. But the ones that the contractors are tackling, no, we don't want to do those. So moving forward, they'll be down sometime probably February, March. They have yet to sign the contract with the city, but that's just a formality. Everything is underway on that, and that'll be the start of phase 3. So right now we have half of them done. So to get done with all of them, we sort of had tacit approval to look for grants as long as we weren't, stepping on someone else's toes. So I think as it stands now, Becky will look at doing a Preserve Oregon grant, which we had one 2 years ago, and also a historic cemetery grant. So those usually due sometime in April, and they tend to like things that are done in phases, so they probably won't leave us hanging. And with just that, if we can get that, we'll have most of the major ones that really need doing and that we don't want to tackle. There'll always be more, and we probably, keep going, but we'll have the 360 that were identified to do that. And we end up with issues. We had one headstone, it was broken when we started. They repaired it. They have to use the least effective way, so the contractors repaired it with Lithium-X, which is a cement mortar. Got broken again. They repaired it with epoxy. It's now broken again, and I'm afraid to tell them that because they won't want to come back again. So what we're doing is the shop at Marshfield has taken our old gate that was there, and they've dismantled it into pieces. And so from that, we're building a little fence. They're just 18 inches high or so, and you obviously can get over it and whatnot. But just to have people think twice, avoid lawn mowing too close to something. And so we'll work on that at the first of the year. And it'll look like it's always been there because it's made out of 60-year-old pieces of things. And I've talked with West Coast Fence, and they actually dismantled an old fence in Bandon, so they're happy to give us equally rusty parts. And they don't look bad, they just look like they belong there, which a new piece of galvanized would look really stupid. So to help meet there's always, or not always, but there's often a funding match that we have to do. So we have sort of started in a soft way the Ignored No More, which is targeting the primarily the alumni from Marshfield. So we've got it going some. With indoor sports, it'll be a little easier than with outdoor sports. So we'll keep working on that. And I think it's not only has brought us money, it's brought us some interest in this cemetery where people could never go in it. And I've heard all kinds of stories about what went on, and like Coco looking up the story, some of them make it in the newspaper and some of them don't. So it's always good to collect those stories and understand that. I've been working for about a year now with a Siletz tribal member that lives in Montana. He has 3 relatives buried in the plot that was owned by the county, and he would like to recognize his relatives with a headstone of some sort. So probably sometime in January he's going to start working with that, and we do have our guidelines for alterations, so it'll be approved because we want them to be above ground a little bit, so they don't get damaged as much. And that may give us, the Siletz have a lot of cousins, including Chief Barrett from the Confederated Tribe. So they always have many Siletz Confederated Tribe cousins. And Jesse Bear, who is their cultural person, did say they have a ground-penetrating radar machine. And that might be something we would do more for a little bit of a learning curve. It was done when the Historic Preservation or the Historic Heritage Conference met here, and we never got the results. And it's been a sore subject for Curry Gill and others that something happened. So it might be an opportunity to do this just to kind of see where we're at with things, and again, invite people to have that. The other thing we'd like to get permission to do is to have, potentially, each year the Coos Bay Garden Club, which actually is a compilation, it's the last remaining. It's a combination of North Bend and Hauser and several garden clubs. So it's the one. And they have 80 enrolled members and about 40 that are there actively every month. So they put on a garden tour, and that they designate a minimum of $1,000 to go to either a North Bend or a Marshfield student each year. And it's someone that's interested in the out of doors in some way. So one possibility, again, to help with that awareness is we'd like to maybe have a place where they could stop was at the Coos Bay, at the Pioneer Cemetery. So we don't have very many flowers there, kind of on purpose. We'll have a few wildflowers, but we'd make it a stop that talks about invasives, and it would be a nice little spot. So if we could get permission to do that, make sure we have your go-ahead on grants that we'd be looking at, and any other questions you might have about what the heck's going on there.
I remember when you gave us the rundown, I don't have it with me, on the different phases. How much are you needing for matching for phase 3 right now, approximately?
For matching? Well, it depends, because the historic cemetery, we sort of got in at the tail end of that. We had that can be used as a matching grant. So with our in-kind donations between OBOB, the housing for them and all that takes care of about half of it. I don't know the numbers right now because he hasn't written the grant. But I'm going to personally consult with our grant writer next. I'm leaving tomorrow, so we'll make sure she's on track, which is my daughter. So she's
So you're going to
looking.
talk the turkey. Is that-
We're both allergic to turkey. We won't be having turkey. We'll be working at her museum for a change.
And what was the full cost without
So the
rates?
full cost is probably somewhere in the ones so far have been around 16,000.
So not-
And,
not-
and the Preserving Oregon can go up to 20, but she's kind of kept it at the 10,000 level.
Okay.
And I think that's what she'd be looking at, 10,000 from them and maybe 5,000.
Okay, gotcha.
So something like that, but, it's, she's got that all planned out that way, and look and see what happens. And it's always very competitive. There haven't been a lot of cemeteries that got the Preserving Oregon, because it has to be on restoration. So, and have a big enough project to make it warranted, so we'll see what happens. I just got an email asking us to do a blog post for their heritage thing that they put out on the Himalayas, that because we use it so much for education. So the Himalayas were we made it out of plastic straws, although they would make it traditionally out of wheat straws. And they were a winter solstice project, and worked with the art class. And the art teacher can't wait to do it again this year. So that's good. So we're on track to do that, because I think that's our strong suit, is that we're used for education. And we partner with everyone, like our headstone dedication and like the tribe. So we get around, and that I think is important. So we'll try and keep that up. And I think I've already mentioned it's already on tap to be an option for the Poetry Slam in April. And that's also good. And any other way that we can do that, one of the English teachers will be teaching a section on sovereignty in the second semester. And so she's planning on working with people in the cemetery, not working with them, but using some of their stories to enhance her educational thing. So the more we do that, the better we are.
Sounds great. I think everything sounds amazing. I will say on the garden tour, to get people to stay, and what we found, because we do go on the tour every year, well, the hosting, it's an awful lot of work and stress, but is if you have food or some sort of beverage, then people stay longer, and then they're more likely to come to your stop, because
They do.
They tend to denote that there's some food and beverage. So.
Well, and each group, in fact, the Garden Club members do make cookies, so there's cookies and some sort of punch at each stop. But I think the biggest thing is I'm just totally amazed how many people say, well, it's locked up, we can't go in it. No, and do you ever look at the signs? And the visitor center is top-notch at referring people. But there's still people that have no idea and are just amazed to go in there. And so that's kind of what we want to do. I don't think they'll tour the cemetery as such, but
I think it's a great a great opportunity to get people in there. It's a good time of year too, beginning of August, so.
Yeah, yeah, it's usually the first Saturday in August, so as long as I'm here, and I think I will be, but make a point of doing that, so
Okay.
we'll continue on with things, and if any of you are alumni, we'll be coming after you.
All right, I don't think that we necessarily need to make any motions. We've got the update,
Just any-
and we're positive with everything that's moving forward, and so,
Yeah, I don't think our grants compete like with the scout cabin or
Yeah.
anything. We make a point
Yeah.
of doing that.
so I think everything that we've approved already is in line with what you're doing, and so
Good.
we're super excited, so.
Great, all right.
Thank you so much.
So, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on down to action item B, adopt a park status report.
Okay. This is Coco Sutton, and I noticed when I sent this in the translation of my version of Word in the cities, there's a question mark wherever there was a T, but it was a T when I sent it. So anyway, this is just an overview. I don't really need to get into too much detail, but I'm going to let you know that we're very excited that we're moving forward on things with partnerships and outreach. We're still doing that. Oregon Bay Area Beautification is very interested. I'm going to skip down to Toppets Park first. So in John Toppets Park, on the 2-year trial program, was to look at the dog waste stations and compostable bags. We did that sample program, and then we found out that when we did the dog days of summer to just test the water about having an event, we got $60 just in a bucket to donate towards those true compostable bags, and we had information on it has to be plant-based to be truly compostable, so we looked up some of that information. Everybody that participated was very excited, so that's a marker that we're coming down with. Whether we do a foundation or whatever you decide, these are in notebooks to segment out what was done for the marketing, who were people that were likely to be involved. And then when we did the signs and benches, I have to tell you, that brought a lot of people out of the woodwork that are wanting to give me money now, and I'm saying no, because we don't have the capacity right now to finish those till we do the markers. So we are going to be looking at getting the markers set up in a place where they're approved by the city to be when we route the face in, because I think having them in someone's personal garage or something is not a good idea. And so we would hopefully be able to get the 12 posts that we have the money for now routed with the numbers and getting the painting on them so that they can be put in late this winter. The money is listed on here of what was put in, but anytime someone's doing a project, it's important because we've been giving all the volunteer hours on all of this to the city so that when they put in for grants, there's one place, and anybody in here that's doing work in parks, if they will turn in the volunteer hours to the city, that way, like Jamie and I were talking about the swimming pool, we do have a form that we've been using for Adopt a Park that can be adopted, but it's really important that those hours get captured, because then when you're putting in for a grant or anything and they ask, what's the past involvement of your town for this? It's not necessarily everybody giving you $100,000. They're looking at, are they using it? Are they involved in it? Are they, doing volunteer work, et cetera? So that's equally as important because they can take a value of those hours, and we have that listed. Moving back up to the Mingus Park Community Building, hopefully by Friday or Monday, the draft 3 will be ready to go up to SHPO. Christine and people from the city have been working on that, and I had to go back and pull information from the newspaper for everything sampling from 1940 to now. So I've got that done, and it's mainly footnotes. So they want to know all that in 2 sentences or a paragraph. So it's been a lot of footnotes. We are very excited that we're moving forward with the foundation, and hopefully by getting that historic preservation grant, because what happens next, and this is really interesting, is the final review in Oregon to kick it over to the national parks includes a gentleman that's name is all over this paper. His name is Stephen Dow Beckham. His dad was Dow Beckham, and he was raised here in Coos Bay. Was a professor of history up at Lewis and Clark College. And in some of the recent stuff, his dad wrote an article pretty much trashing the city of Coos Bay for wanting to tear down the cabin and not preserving a lot of the historic buildings back in the day. So I'm making an effort to make sure that anything that I'm putting in there with his name on it is as accurate as possible, because he's one of the main people that will be reviewing this. And I know that's always been something close to his heart because, like a lot of people, he was a scout in that building. So youth programs and activities. So that would be finalized by National Parks if we get through this in June. And that opens up for state historic preservation grants. There is a company out of Portland, Oregon that has offices in Eugene that is going to come down here when they're not on standby for riots. And they have that riot glass, and they are going to be coming down this winter and looking to help us do a demonstration project with either a fitted window that would go over the glazing and the existing muntins and wooden frame. And then they also have some screens and roll-up stuff that's new, and it's not like anything that I've ever seen before. They have screens that you can't stab through with a knife. So we're looking to do a demonstration project with the glazing that's drilled in with fixed receptacles for the bolts so that you can take them off if you need to clean. Half the windows are operable, half of them are not, and there's a few of them that are missing. So we're going to try to get the glazing in the front so that we can see how much condensation that might create on the wood, because if it does, then that's not an option for protecting the windows. So that way we'll have a lot of field work done in this process so that once the roof and the foundation are done, those other things, we'll have all those things answered to the National Parks historic definition. Because one of the things that our mentor, I guess is the best way of mentioning the lady at State Historic Parks who is assigned to our case, there is nothing like this that I can find anywhere in the United States in the cabin information that's on the National Historic Register. Vertical log cabins are very rare because you're going against gravity putting them up and you've got to fit them, and there's no chinking on that cabin. The only one I could find was in England that was built in 1065, and it was using massive oak logs. So that's kind of a whole different set. So it's really exciting if we can get this on that National Register. I think it will help for fundraising beyond our area, because we'll get the attention of some of these other people that have a history with this cabin. And as people come back, I've heard the host up there say during class reunions, somebody will come by and ask him for a tour because 40, 50 years ago, they were a scout. And there's a lot of bluebirds, campfire girls, all this. There was a huge, huge thing. So, and they're still in there today. So, thank you.
Any questions?
Just on the, Coco has been doing so much on this all over the spectrum. My little piece was getting the compostable bags purchased, and I did check with Lance many sessions ago and asked him if, because we did find a supplier that got them for the same cost as plastic bags. I just want to make sure that if that's still the case, that we can continue doing this throughout the city's park.
So I think that's our intention, is to just
Okay.
convert completely over.
Wonderful.
One of the things we noticed on the Mingus Park restrooms and other things is when you're putting in for grants now, there's a lot of questions about projects being sustainable. And anything that you can put in to show that you are using as much as you can products that aren't impacting in a negative way on your parks is really going to be important. And that's just another thing to track and keep track. So as people are planning what you want to do for the fundraising arm, these pieces that have been sampled for the Adopt-A-Park all that paperwork can be transferred into that with the data. And so we've got a lot of data that's been completed along with people's names and addresses that need to be put in a database. So I'll be working with the city on how we can domicile that so that it can be utilized later in those two parks, because those are the largest parks. It's 120 acres for Toppets and 55 for Mingus.
Thank you.
Ariane? I was just saying to say, I noticed in reading the report on Adopt the Parks, I saw some distressing news in there that Coco's term is expiring in December. And I know a lot of people have contributed to both the Mingus Park project at the cabin, the community building, and at Tapas Park, but Coco really has been the motivator and really has expended a lot of energy in doing that. So I'm sitting here as a parks commissioner saying, gosh, we've made such progress. I'm worried about if she leaves, what's going to happen. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I am going to be a volunteer for the city parks.
All
But I would
right.
rather focus on very particular things that are very time-consuming behind the scenes, such as getting forms, getting data, putting them in a database, putting books together with information that can help with grants, help with funding, helping with the backbone. So it's kind of like if someone's building a computer system, you have the hardware and the software, and they have to meet together because the city capacity, they don't have that capacity. It was never built into the city. And unless we get some new miraculous funding sources, I think we've pretty much narrowed down that you're going to have to look at either a tax base or a foundation to do that. But you can at least hit the road running with those things in hand. So I've already turned my application into
Jessica?
Jessica. Yes, I'm sorry. Jessica, I laid it on her desk today, so there you go.
Nice.
Well, good. I'm happy to hear that. The other thing that I noticed is there was an item on there again about assisting the scouts and the Coos Bay City staff in calendar management. And we talked about that, I thought, one time before, and we thought about trying to look at whether there is a web-based method of doing that. And I don't particularly know what happened with that, but.
There was in our fact-finding committee where we were looking at the actual permits and that process. Most parks, when you have a host, they have assignments, and then there's a mechanism of a individual, which like a host volunteer, they haven't had one since the 80s, and they would disseminate information saying, oh, every week or every day when something changes on that calendar. But then you have a resolution that is binding. It has not been rescinded by the city, saying any youth scouting groups have access to that building free, and that requires an oversight. So I already set up that piece of the information with the scouts, but it's for 2 years because they have a calendar that runs for 2 years. So at the end of 2025, that's going to need to be renewed. And they are they're redoing their group again starting January of 2025. It is now going to be called Scouting USA, and that means it's a program that is inclusive for all youth up to age 18. So, and their program base compared to the original 1912 Boy Scouts is entirely different because our societal need for people to know how to go out in the wilderness and build fires and do things is not in the curriculum anymore. So if you go on to their website, you'll see that retooling, and they have a new CEO and a CFO that will be managing that. But it's an opportunity for youth in our community to get more involved in the parks, just as Cricket has done with the group with the cemetery. When you get the people that are right next door that were more inclined to go in and have some parties and smoke pot and drink in the cemetery and disturb the graves, and you start getting them involved in an educational means of what's there and what that means, that can change the dynamics of that. And that's the same thing in our parks, because then they're more inclined to say, if I see somewhere up here messing with this, I'm gonna step in and say, because a lot of the neighbors have already commented up there in that area. A lot of people didn't know that was part of Mingus Park. So anyway, yes, that's something that there's a lot of other pieces that need to be worked on that were started years ago, and then they kind of dropped into the wayside. And it comes under the heading of oversight And that's difficult because a lot of the things that come into the parks, a group or an organization that's not under the city is the oversight, and then that group changes, the dynamics change, their focus changes. So that's something that's in those behind-the-scene things that we're gonna still need to work on.
And then, because I'm involved in a couple other things, I've looked at some calendar management, facility management, camp, student software programs that are out there. There's some great stuff, some of it's very confusing, but I think that there's some component pieces where we take what Coco was saying, we eliminate some of the onboarding staff Coos Bay requirements, and then take a look at that through like a Calendarly app, and then they have all of those built-in waivers and things and checks, and all of that stuff is built into the system. So I think we can push to get towards that technical piece that can be streamlined so that people can look at the calendar, book it, get the waiver forms, know that they have to make a payment or not make a payment because they have a special code. It's all online, and then it can be reviewed by a certified volunteer and/or staff.
So well, go ahead, Eric, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the conference rooms at the Coos Bay Library are all scheduled online.
Yeah, it's
So-
a similar process.
So I do know that we have created that calendar. I know,
Okay.
I was just trying to find it myself. Maybe it is difficult to find. I'll follow up and send a link to it. I know we created it, because I know we've had some conversations about it internally.
It's internal.
It's just an
Yeah,
internal calendar?
I think
Maybe that's where
what
I'm
people
mistaken
are
then.
striving in the future, I wouldn't recommend it right now personally, but in the future is having, when you click on and it says, government, whatever, it doesn't say parks on your web page, but in the future, sometime down the road, when you have things in place on your backbone, is you click in and it says, Toppets Park, Mingus Park, Boardwalk, whatever. Anything that's rentable or usable, there's usually a link where it goes back, and then that's where you can make the reservation. It used to be when, in 1968, Empire was annexed into the city, there was another community building there. And they've always had a fee. So that building was $50 for 4 hours in 1960. I don't know what happened to that building. I didn't have time to look it up. And the scout cabin was much less for the whole day. But now the only building that is not a special use permit in the park system, my understanding is that cabin, but it has not been actively promoted because there were safety concerns, and we've been addressing those safety concerns. And I think within the next year, once those concerns, like the exit signs and some of these other things that we're getting donations to do, in addition to the big things, once those are addressed, it makes it a little more palatable to promote it. Now, people that know it's there, when we're doing fundraising and we put the new sign up, the new sign, if you haven't driven by, is ready to be installed soon. And that's to let people know that, yes, this is a public space, it's a public building. Little children weren't slave labored to build it. It was union people that were building it, and I have photos now, but it was built for youth. It was built for the community. And that's what it should be, because that's what the granting is about, is showing that it's always been a centerpiece. People have 50th wedding anniversaries there. They have all kinds of stuff there, and we have that documentation. And later, being able to tell that story to get revitalization in the park and that upper reaches, I think, is really important, because you've got a lot of people living in the bushes up there on that upper area.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Coco. Any other additional comments or questions about the Adopt a Park status report? All right, moving on to item 2C, Safe Routes to School update.
So, do you want to take it away, Jimmy?
Well, I looked through this briefly. The places that I was involved with Eric was meeting with the team at Sunset School and at Marshall during the morning for Sunset and the afternoon at Marshall. You see the sorry. Should I repeat that? Okay.
I'm sure we picked it up.
Okay. And there's nobody on. Anyway, it was, and then we met with the staff at each building to go over what we had seen. There were 4 or 5 of us at each site looking at the different pathways into the schools and reported on what we witnessed. And they were going to come back with more details of how to deal with the congestions. Marshfield seemed to be the biggest problem, but everybody seems to get through it, and I don't remember the particulars with Marshfield. There's a bottleneck because of the junior high and high school releasing, and there's especially at 7th and I think it's not Elrod Johnson. There's a 3-way stop there, right near the cemetery. That people are supposed to come down out of Marshfield and turn right only during certain times, but that sign that says to do that is like up here, and it's small, it's about this big, and people are turning left when they can, so they're trying to, but it worked out. Apparently there's only been one incident, and it was not, there was minor injuries, I guess, or no injuries.
Sunset is bad because there's a lot of people the Sunset School has a 4-way stop, and I subbed there several times and was the stop, or I have to throw the stop sign in, and...
Is that the end of the day or the beginning of the day?
It's at the end of the day. They used to have somebody from Coos Bay Police Department actually park up there, law enforcement, when school starts, and they would have a presence there, but 4-way stop, and they don't stop. It's a suggestion. And there's kids, walking all 4 corners to get across that intersection, and that's, Madison is on the other side, it's not as bad, but right there at the lower end of Sunset, that 4-way street intersection there is...
Yeah, I was parked at Newmark, and, well, you were there.
I was there.
Yeah, Newmark and Cammon, and I saw no pedestrians, virtually no pedestrians, no bicyclists, students. I saw students in cars taking a left onto Cammon with parents, or buses.
The one thing that was in that school is a lot of kids on skateboards and those electronic, it's like a Segway without a handle, and I mean, they're zipping through there. So they're not exactly a bicycle, but they're in that realm.
And the principal at Marshfield said that a lot of students are not bringing bikes because they get stolen, even though they have bike racks outside. But they're bringing the electric scooters, or just scooters, and because they'll fold up and put it in, they can secure them in their lockers. So they're clever.
My granddaughter rode her one-wheel when she used to go there, the electric one-wheel, same thing, and put it in a backpack and walked around school the rest of the day. I took a look at this report, and a couple of things. I guess I understand this was just kind of reviewing all of our plans to try to see where the problems were, and they're going to come back to us now at some time with some recommendations on what to do. Right. Yeah.
Correct.
And then the second thing, I know that I'm sure that the request for this grant went in saying the Academy and Sunset and Marshfield, and I saw the data sheets for those schools. But I'm assuming that when they do some of this planning, they were doing it based on the enrollment and the students that were there and all those sorts of things. Even though Marshfield Junior High School wasn't included as, part of that group, I kind of wonder why, because I mean, it's contingent with Marshfield High School. Any kind of planning you're doing for pedestrian bikes would include the students at the junior high school, and that would show that there's actually a larger enrollment at those schools. I have to say, as an aside too, looking at those statistics, I mean, I felt really bad seeing the non-attendance and the disabilities and the other stuff. It was a little bit disheartening. But anyways, yeah, I maybe there's some restriction now since that's how the grant request went in, but I think it's too bad because there's a lot of 7th and 8th graders down there. So, and they might be prone to walking and riding bikes and one wheels and electric ski.
Madison's not in here, it's up above.
Yeah, that's right up above Sunset.
Yeah, and, but you can only, I think what it is they're looking at the area and they're focusing on testing.
Well, one thing to consider also is that they go a 2-mile radius, and they consider that 2-mile radius. And so they're maybe focusing or in naming a school, and so maybe they're taking that into consideration. But I definitely think it's worth a question to Alta Planning. Are they considering the population, student populations of both Madison with Sunset and the Marshfield High School, junior high school with Marshfield High School?
Yeah, and I think as they look at that, of course, they will, since it's within that radius, they'll be taken into consideration. But what I kind of got out of the first part of that, where they were describing the information about the schools, was that was important as they went forward for grants and for proceeding with the state in how to address this, the issues of transportation for pedestrians and bicyclists around the school areas. So I think it would just be nice to include them. So.
I agree, and I think Madison should, if they can be in there, because technically that's a whole block area there where you have Sunset and then Madison's above. And a lot of kids, they have siblings, so they're coming across the fields and coming around, and, so that becomes a big conglomeration in that whole area. And they don't all get out at the same time, but you have the kindergartners are coming in and out of there. And some of the kids that are in the lower grades tend to have, I think, more of the bicycle things than the older kids. The older kids are looking at scooters, the one-wheels, the electronic gadgets, whereas when you get to the smalls, they might have more of that because they live in those areas. So,
And I will tell you that I see a lot of kids walking down the street one way to the north to McKay's at lunchtime, and I see a lot of kids walking to the east to McDonald's all at lunchtime too. I mean, there is a lot of foot traffic on those streets already. So I know when you guys went and looked at those places, I'll tell you, around lunchtime is a good time to look and see where everybody's walking and moving. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, because I was able to go to the Sunset morning session. I wasn't able to go to the afternoon sessions, but I went to the morning sessions. And one thing I found interesting was the fact that in talking with the principal, and just even my observation, Jamie observed the same thing. No kids walking to school. I was at the intersection of Michigan and Morrison, and I was at that intersection for 45 minutes. I didn't see one pedestrian walk by. But I did see a lot of school buses picking up kids. I did find out from the principal later on in that morning that the buses pick up the kids from literally a block and a half away and take them from there and bus them to the school.
Yeah, gone are the days of if you lived within a mile, you had to walk.
And also a lot of parents just drive their kids. Yeah.
In the afternoons, there's a lot of kids. They get dropped off in the mornings, but in the afternoons, they're.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
And it's also interesting, just to digress, of course, is the bus stops are also a lot more frequent than they used to be. Instead of it being like one every half mile or mile and a half. Yeah, yeah, it's like I'll get stuck behind the bus and it's like 3 in the whole block radius, which is, it is what it is. But it's just, some of it's a different thing, but I think the after school, and then people having the perception that it's safe. So that's street illumination, good sidewalks, making sure all of those parts and pieces are in there so that they feel that it's a straight shot and they can feel comfortable walking. So there's that piece. Any additional further comments on Safe Routes to Schools? Thank you, Greg, for the update.
Thank you.
Action item 2D, park-related projects and grant updates.
At the August 15th Park Commission meeting, it was agreed in an effort to enhance transparency and communication between staff and commission. Staff will provide monthly updates. For Mingus Park restrooms, we have the local government grant approved for $343,464. Judith Ann Mogan Foundation. Oh, so for the local government grant, we are still awaiting the grant agreement from OPRD. Judith Ann Mogan Foundation, we were awarded $50,000 towards the match. First Interstate Bank Foundation, I have turned in that letter of intent to the local branch. Front Street, Oregon Community Pass. Staff submitted a letter of intent for 30% design of a multi-use path. Staff is currently working on an application that is due January 15th, 2025. Safe routes to school. Development of an existing conditions document for traffic and safety analysis. Bike improvement facilities. Discussion on a traffic signal at Highway 101 and Commercial Avenue. Mingus rewilding, the playground equipment was relocated, stormwater improvements and ongoing work with completion expected in spring of 2025. Anderson sidewalk improvements, the contractor has begun the sidewalk rehabilitation along Anderson Avenue near the Coos Bay Public Library. Spring Street projects, the city of Coos Bay intends to award the contract to Johnson Rock Products, Inc. for the spring of 2024 street projects once approved by City Council. Operations and maintenance, we have Empire Boat Ramp that was, the docks have been removed. They're to be reinstalled April of 2025. Mingus Park, a new sign was installed at the top entrance. Sidewalk improvements, work on sidewalk along 101 at Golden Avenue due to a vehicle accident with completion expected of February 2025.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the update.
So if I may, just want to give you a couple quick updates. So the 2024 Spring Street projects did go to council on the 19th, and the council did approve that. So a letter was sent to the contractor of award. So that is going to be moving forward nicely. So we're moving forward with that. The Anderson sidewalk project, that's coming along. The concrete is almost complete. This next week, they're going to come in and finish this, install the storm line, which is what those steel plates out there on Anderson are for. They have that excavated. The weather this week really put us back just a little bit. And so they're going to be in town Monday to do the storm drain tie-in. And they have the catch basin is already set. So we're getting close on that project.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. The First Interstate Bank Foundation grant that was submitted on the 19th, was our old grant writer do that one, or did you guys have to do it?
She did help with that.
Okay, all right. I noticed on the bank improvement facilities part on page 38, where was the old Cheryl's projects, it says this will be going to the council in December. I wasn't quite exactly sure what we were going to be asking the council in December.
So council asked that we bring back this project to them with costs. So right now I'm working on getting design costs, construction costs, everything like that back to them so they can make that final decision with it to move it forward with the design.
Okay. And the Spring Street project is the one on Anderson with the bike lanes, right?
The Spring Streets project is on Central.
Central, excuse me.
Yes.
With the bike lanes.
With the removal of the non-compliant center turn lane, the addition of the bike lanes, and then also that does include some improvements on 9th Street. 9th Street, South 9th Street.
Okay. And I really love these things, by the way. But I noticed in here, we listed a Lowe's hometown grant, but I didn't see it in the discussion on the first page, so I kind of wondered where we were with that.
That opens in January of 2025.
I'm sorry?
It opens in January of 2025, so we cannot apply for it until then.
Okay.
So which funding is that? That's for the
Yeah, for the restrooms and the
restrooms?
rewilding project. I only ask because here we talked about the grants for the Mingus Park restrooms, and I didn't see that one listed, and so I didn't understand.
Okay,
So, because I see that the First Interstate Bank grant and the Lowe's Home grant, if we don't get those come out of the park's capital budget.
that is absolutely
And I
correct.
know we're going to talk about the budget a little bit later on, and so that also spurred my interest because of that. And then one last one, the Mingus Park Community Building Fund Strategy. As an aside, the book hasn't gone down to you yet, but I was interested to see that a lot of the articles were about the community park. They really used that terminology, back then. So the whole concept of a community building really ties in with the history of that whole area, which I thought was pretty cool. On this one, there's $8,300 in permits. Does the city ever waive that?
So we have some permits that we can waive fees on, and there's other permits that we cannot waive fees on.
Okay. And I'm taking it that this is one we can't waive.
Where there are the building permits, there's certain permits that we just cannot waive fees on.
Okay, all right. I was just hoping we had an extra $8,300.
I wish we did too.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Additional comments related to the project and grant update?
Yes, I'd like to say, first of all, this is an incredible amount of work from all the city staff here and people that you don't see in a very short period of time. And they're always looking for other grant opportunities because even since COVID, a lot of the individuals like the Fred Meyer Foundation and a lot of those other grants that people used to get have refocused to poverty and those kind of things. I don't know if you looked, but when you were mentioning the Safe Routes to School, Sunset School, 58% of the student body there is below the poverty line. So a lot of children might be getting dropped off by foster parents. One day they're doing this, one day they're doing that. So just the fact that we have that need in our community for youth activities and stuff, this is phenomenal. And the restrooms, I believe in Mingus Park, the last time that restroom was redone was what, early 60s?
Yeah, I think in that time frame, yes.
Because that park's been redone, 35 to 40, they put in the comfort station. Then they redid some stuff in the 60s with new bathrooms when they wanted to put in a petting zoo, which thankfully they didn't. And then since then, there's really been one budget crisis after another where things were at a stalemate for getting anything done. So I just want to say to the city and the people sitting here, this is a lot in a very short period of time. So congratulations, and there could be new grants coming out in January. So,
Thank you, Coco. Thank you. We're moving on down to the Mingus Park Community Building Foundation Stabilization Grant Update.
So if you don't mind, if you can just humor me while I run through this report, because reading it for me is going to be a lot better than trying to maybe just answer some questions. So to date, 3 grants have been secured for the Mingus Park Community Hall Foundation Stabilization Project: the Ford Family Foundation, the Coquille Community Tribal Fund, and the Kinsman Foundation, as well as an additional $7,831 in fundraising efforts through the Adopt a Park program. The project includes the installation of helical piers to secure the building's foundation for years to come. The total grants awarded plus the donated funds are $45,331. And the budget for this project is about $99,402. The secured grant dollars are just under 40% of the total budget. But if the grant dollars are not utilized, particularly grant dollars from the Ford Family Foundation, they will expire. Staff will continue to apply for grants, but capital funds of $54,071 will be utilized if grant dollars are not found. Moving forward to the next phase of the community hall project, roof, windows, chimneys, work, etc., it is anticipated that there will be more grant opportunities once the community hall is accepted into the National Register of Historic Places. So if you, we're going to we're anticipating, we're going to move forward with the project. We're going to spend $54,071 out of the Parks Capital Fund for this project, because it's important. Plus, we have that twilight of the Ford Family Foundation, May 31st of 2025. So we're moving forward with that project. I'm actually drafting the scope of work now for the request for quotes. So we're working on that now. So the next project that we're talking about today is the Mingus Park rewilding project and the Mingus Park restrooms, which are tied together due to the funding. The rewilding project includes the relocation of the playground equipment, enclosing the old picnic area, and fixing existing drainage issues. The restrooms, including installing one new restroom near the playground and renovating the restrooms that will serve the ball fields. To date, the city has received $40,000 from the Mogan Foundation for the rewilding. This money has been spent, and it is anticipated an additional $43,500 will be used from the capital funds to finish the project. The restroom project was awarded a grant from the Oregon Park and Recreation Department through the local government grant, which Christina alluded to earlier, but the total budget for that is $572,411. The grant requires a 40% match, and the city has and continues to apply for grants for this project. To date, $395,964 has been secured for the project, which includes the LGP grant. If the city is unsuccessful in obtaining additional grants, the remaining funds will come from the Parks capital budget. And down below, I have a breakdown of each remaining dollars for the capital expenditure for each project. And then the total budget for the Parks capital plan. And then in the attachments, I have Fund 45, which is where the Parks capital dollars are located, and the FS10 report for Fund 45, which is reflecting the dollars spent. So out of Fund 45, we spent about $53,000 right now. $40,000 of that is the grant from the Judith Ann Mogan Foundation, so that'll be coming back in a supplementary budget. So
Thank
ask
you.
away.
Okay. I'm excited that while we don't want to use capital funds, that the city is okay the capital funds to move forward with these projects. So I think that's important, an important focus. Kurt, you have questions?
Of course, but only because I don't understand half of this stuff. I get the stuff about if we don't get the grants, that some of the grants that we've applied for, that the funding for those couple of projects, the community building and the restrooms and the rewilding, is going to come out of the capital parks fund. The pages that were given to us, there's the 4 months ending November 30th for the capital improvement fund, and it was one section, and then that's the expenditure side, and then starting on page 46 was the resources side. I'm assuming that's, even though it's called Fund 45 there and it's not called Fund 45 on the other page, they're both Fund 45?
In the other page?
This page. So here it just says Capital Improvement Fund, but here on the resources it says Capital Improvement Fund 45. So I'm assuming they're both the same.
Yeah, so the capital improvement fund, if you look on the left side of that sheet, the GL numbers 45, that here on this section here,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
the funding, that's the fund.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the fund.
So my question is, when I look at the expenditures line, when I look through that, I see there's one line that's construction and parks.
That's our parks,
And that's our improvement fund?
that is our improvement fund.
But up here it says we budgeted $437,102, and that line says budgeted $489,602. Yes, Jennifer?
Supplemental budget.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, because and then the other part, it doesn't really have to do so much with well, on that same page, the building improvements, I'm assuming that's other city improvements, so the community building couldn't be considered building improvements. I wish it could.
Wish you could.
So, and the other question that I had then was, when you go to the back page of those resources, I know from reading this, it appears that the auditor said, okay, just don't have those separate park fund and don't have the separate bike pedestrian fund. Actually roll them into these other funds. And am I kind of correct on that? If you look at this back page, these have been, it was transferred from the Parks Improvement Fund and transferred from the Bike Ped Path Fund. And when I read through this, there was an auditor's suggestion that those just all go into another bigger fund, right?
Fund 2.
Yeah. And I can see a line there then for the parks construction, which we just talked about. Is there a line there for the bike and ped?
There is in Fund 2, there is a line for bike and ped, and I did not include that in this staff report, the bike and ped.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, we have so many pedestrian and bike projects kind of mulling around a little bit. I just wanted to make sure that I could see where that money was and how it was being tracked, being used.
Let me grab it for you. I can, if you give me 1 second.
Oh, you don't, you can grab it for me later. I don't
Okay.
need to take I'm comfortable with the fact that we're tracking it separately so that we know how much money is there and available for bike and ped fund projects, that's all.
I appreciate the question.
Okay, that's all I had.
Additional questions or comments about the stabilization grant? No, I'm excited that we're moving forward with the projects. Of course, we hope that more grants come in, but it's good that we're moving forward. And I think when we go out and request additional grants and funds from other people, it shows that we are following through with projects. And so that helps us even more so in the future. Very important. Right, moving on down to public comment. I don't see any additional public comments. So, and then moving on down to future agendas, regular meetings and work sessions. It's a reminder that we are not doing our work session on December 5th, but we are having our Parks Commission on December 19th at 4 o'clock here. Are there any items that people are seeing an immediate need to add to the agenda? Other than what's on here? Okay. All right, so staff and commissioner closing comments. Coco?
Yes, I wanted to point out that I'd like this book, if possible, to be kept with the Weber plans that were in your office, Christine. This is proof. One of the questions that I keep getting from SHPO is there was another project that went on simultaneously with the WPA for improvements to Lower Mingus Park, and they keep trying to make sure that the community building was a separate entity, which it was entirely. This is that wading pool, I think, that is in the location where you were. Right. You see this here. We have a picture when this was brand new in 1940 where the U of O architect came in. And then they had another U of O architect come in 1959. And you'll notice that the comfort station restroom, that's what they called it in those days, is shown in here. And you'll see a fireplace that looks very similar to a fireplace that's double-sided because that's that local stonework. None of that is still around, and that's the information I've been trying to hammer in that report. And this is proof that Stephen Dow Beckham in '74 made that same observation. We have photos, we have information, but this is clearly a picture other than that beautiful one that you saw, Greg. They said that can't be Mingus Park, when it was brand new. And, but a lot of the stuff they wanted to do on that blueprint never did get done, but that did. And there was always some kind of a duck pond or something in that location because that's where people had, dammed the upper part where the creeks came in. And then down there, I think you said there's a spring or something else, but there was some woman in your Mingus Park deeds that deeded and she had a duck pond. And I think that's that same location. So this is valuable.
That's why I kept it.
Thank you. Bill, any closing comments? No. All right. Jamie?
During these last few weeks of rain, Coco and I have been checking in on our water bars on the pathway that goes from Choshi Garden up to the community building. And they're working reasonably well, but there needs some adjustment. One of them is getting eroded because there's too much water coming off of the parking lot of the community building. But Mike, the host, has been doing his own water bars, and he's got some ideas. Anyway, and I've talked before about, when we talk about dredging of the Mingus Pond, at the very base of that pathway, there's a trail that goes off that meets up with the new sign on the north end of the Mingus Park. It's on a fall line, and it's just this chute, and it's carved a gully right through the pathway at the bottom of that, putting sediment there, and it also has put sediment in the catchment basin that has clogged the culvert going underneath that path, and that whole thing is going to fail in the next event unless it's dealt with. So another, call to, it would be, we need to get these trails repurposed and get rid of the fall line trails, essentially, because they're just adding to our problems. Anyway, I got pictures if anybody wants.
I think the end of that is the catch basement that Bev Myers was talking about, that was originally supposed to be maintained. We used to call them bioswales, now is what they use for those. And I think the middle one, if I'm not mistaken, is holding, but that's because the runoff on that site for that cabin has been reworked so many times, and it naturally wants to go on the southeast and the northeast side into the two ravines. And if we don't do some grading, I think it's just going to keep adding more water to that foundation. And historically, that's been a problem on that site, because also you have a very steep, I think it's a 10-12 and 12-12 an area roof line. A lot of water comes off that roof line too, and then comes down, and you can see where it's coming in. So right now, the water bars that we cut out of the holly are too short. And I think I talked to Greg, and the city wants to keep those multi-purpose paths, so we can't do rock dams. So that's something we're going to have to
Work around.
Yeah, because kids do take not kids, everybody takes bicycles down there. And I think when I first was on the Parks Commission, that's where a woman came in and said she had fallen because it had a really deep gully, and we know why that's happening. But we may be able to grade from that corner on that southeast side over towards the ravine, Jamie, and get it to fall naturally into the ravine before it hits the gravel on the trail. But I'm not going to shovel it.
Thank you. Kirk?
I know that trail on the fall line that goes down the park, and if you're a pedestrian, you risk your life because you slip and slide. And hopefully one of these days we can find something that works for everybody. And I had a grandson that used to shoot it on his mountain bike, but I don't know if that was the best thing in the world either. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is I hope we do keep some focus still on funding sources. I've noticed it's not on our agenda next time, and that's okay. We don't have enough time, but I really would like to see us get started on the concept of a foundation, and I really would like to have some serious discussions about some other funding sources, the things that we've talked about, because we won't be able to accomplish a lot of the things that we want to do if we don't have the money to do them. And I know the money's not available right now in the city's budget to do it, so we have to look for some alternative sources. So, thank you.
Thank you. Staff closing comments? Greg?
I don't really have much other than I hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for everything you guys have done through the year. It's amazing. You were absolutely right, Coco, about the amount of work that we've done in a short amount of time, but we couldn't have done that without the guidance of this body. I appreciate it. So with that, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Comment? No? Good? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I appreciate the brand new clock. It's bright. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I complained about the last one. I didn't mean that we needed a brand-new one, but I like it. It's kind of nice. Keeps me on track a little bit. I like the second countdown. Just really
It does have a
eliminated it.
timer too.
Oh, nice. Ooh, I might have to use that. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you. I'm just walking away from the paper. Oh, it's amazing. I didn't know Mary brought it in.